Someone asked, can you tell us more on numbers and the deeper meanings? Numbers are really the only form of communication that is universal. Frequencies. We use numbers to count things, and even across the board, when you go to other countries and you start asking for a certain amount of something, then you can hold up fingers in order to indicate what are the amounts. And so what happens is that the numbers themselves are master archetypes. See, it's instead of even seeing it as a symbol, even though there is some symbolism that shows you what each number does, right? Like when you look at threes and you look at twos, like 3 is obviously like an E, it's like energy, it's like a wave, right? And then, you got 1, that's like the solo, either it's one direction or the other direction, and, that's pretty much it. And so you could see in the geometry of the words, or excuse me, of the letters, of the mode of thought and the activity. However, what you get into is you get into entire archetypes, like 1, the pioneer, 2, communication, and 3, manifestation. And then what happens is that you can then examine the traits of the numbers that bring across these core principles that when combined, like when you make 12, when you make 33, when you make 45, when combined, equal more complex modes and traits. But the most interesting part about it is numbers such as, let's say, 64. At 64, of the when the splitting from 1, then to 2, then to 4, then to 8, which is called mitosis with the body. Once it gets to 64, that's when the complex parts of the body begin to develop. So then we find same thing with computers, that computers move on that same 64-bit, and then they move from there 128-bit. And then you have numbers like 12 and 60, which the Sumerians used for indications of time and indications of the power structure. And you still see now 60 hertz, which is our power structure. Time, 12, 24 hours, 36 hours, 72 hours is divisible by 12. All those being indications of the time and the current and the power structure, and how that's all still being used now. And then how the same kingdoms that use those same numbers, these are universal codes and universal languages. See, because what happens is if we start looking at some of this new symbolism and new language, then we can get completely confused that we're not still talking about a unified system. Because in many cases, people start looking at this one little symbol and they think that this symbol is like its own thing, when really it's just a part of a much more larger symbol. So we're encouraged in life then to look at the entire meaning of things and to figure out how things connect. Because the klipot of numbers, meaning the problem with numbers is numbers are naturally used to divide things in most people's mind. But for the mind that's already beginning to progress, it knows how to use the numbers to figure out how things connect. And more than anything, like if you look at words like misunderstanding, right? And then you take each acronym of those words, like they teach you in English honors or whatever, it can show you what each acronym means. So then you can, each part of the word, you can find out what it means, each prefix and suffix, right? And then you can then put together what anything means as long as you know what those little small words mean. Numbers work the same way. And then it gets so deep, and what I'm beginning to realize is that numbers is the actual proficient system of being able to be like a layover, a GUI, or what's called a HUD over the natural reality. That you can use numbers to actually define what goes on in a natural reality. And that's why, again, Pythagoras, Socrates, etc., go into the all is numbers, that God is a number, God's works can be discovered through numbers. And the reason why they're saying that is because it's not just the number itself, it's also the rhythmic tone, what we call the beats per minute. And I'm going to have a gentleman named Derek come to the show and explain all this, because even now I'm only giving it the surface, but he's going to get deep into this and explain how this all works and how even 60 beats per minute can actually be somehow parallel to 60 seconds per minute. So if you're looking at on a per minute level, then each minute is a herd. So after 60 hertz, which is 1 hour, 60 minutes is 60 hertz, and then it goes back to 1 hour. So it's just basically, and I kind of butchered it up then, I meant to say that 60 seconds then becomes 1 minute. And that 1 minute is then in 60 hertz, and then you can keep doing the math. But this is how you start calculating what the Pythagoreans call the perfect fifth and the perfect harmonic scales. And what this can then do is you can then take these scales and you can hear them in music, so you can know if they're harmonic. So this is how you like check numbers to make sure that they're accurate, is you bring them back into the actual frequency and the tones that can be played on things like a guitar, can even be played with drums. And if it doesn't sound harmonic, which is something that we're able to pick up, and that's another big thing, we know how perfect we are because we can hear when things are out of tone, and we can hear when they actually are in tone. And when they're in tone, of course, it sounds great to us. And when they're out of tone, it's like, yo, that, turn that off. And so that means naturally we know perfection. And this is just amazing things. Like they would love to tell us that, the truth is that the way we act and the things that we do every day show how magnificent we are. Just the basic stuff.